Okay, let's, while we got four, and because we may be in a situation and then there were three. As Chairman Chambers said, we'll start with the batting order, Department of Defense, Department of Law, Supreme, and then Superior Court. Is the Department of Defense ready? Yes, sir. Let me just tell the committee, we're on page 22, 22 of 50 on our tracking document. Yes, sir. Please continue.
Out of each class cycle from each academy. So basically we're taking out four groups of 50 students each, so it would be a 200 reduction in number of students. Not asking for more money. The one thing that I would ask is that have pity on us. We have 24 100% state positions filled right now. We have 8 vacant. We have bled and are bleeding. There's really not a lot to take up. I know furloughs has been thrown out. Furloughs don't mean anything to us because with so few state positions, we just really can't make up any money that way. So, like I say, we're just kind of asking for pity.
Unfortunately, we can't pay the bills with that. I mean, I hear you, and I don't mean to be cold when I say that. You know, there are reductions that are happening across government that we wish we didn't have to make. I just asked Ms. Mitchell to go down, and she pulled it up. I don't have the list in front of me. We came up straight from the floor, but you're aware that revenue revision that came out on March 3rd, and that had an additional reduction.
98,000.
Yeah, what we wish for you to do is work with Ms. Mitchell as soon as possible to identify where you would prefer to take that reduction. We'd rather you do that than us to do that, and provide that as soon as you can in writing to her. And really, if there's any opportunity to do any, I mean, I don't know that it really applies here. I mean, to do any sort of facility consolidation and so forth, I'm not sure it really applies to the Department of Defense, but we'd like to know about that, where we can do the same or more for the same or less. But if we could get you guys to do that with her and get that. I mean, it's a tough ask, but no later than the close of business on Monday. We would really appreciate it. Subcommittee, have any questions? Have any questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Sure.
The Department of Law, Mr. Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll follow suit. We are certainly not coming to ask for any additional money today. But, Mr. Chairman, I would like to renew our request from last time that we do no more damage to the state's law department's budget. We have seen the governor's revenue revision. We're working mightily to make sure that we can accommodate that as best we can. We're seeing more of what we talked about for the FY09 budget. We're holding positions. We are taking salaries where we can. We're trying to hold down salaries. We are finding every pocket of money that we can through retirements, that we might be able to save money through any and every sort of opportunity. We are looking for them in our state budget. I understand that we may even have some employees who are out buying their own supplies now, or
Now I know why Chairman Martin stepped out, because I get to make the announcement, Mr. Attorney General, that we need to find another $175,944 to take out of the budget. And, well, we have till Monday?
Well, probably within the next couple, oh, really? Yes, sir.
Okay. Oh, good, you're back.
No, keep going.
Oh, darn it. Yeah, let me be the bearer of bad news. And the unfortunate reality is that is the amount that we've been asked to cut, and like the chairman said, we'd rather you make that selection than us. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but apparently it's going to be repeated over and over today.
We're trying everything we
I
can.
know.
We'll try and get some recommendations too.
I know you are. And please tell the employees that are buying their own supplies and not doing reimbursement that they're great Georgians and we just love them. And that's unfortunate. I can give them a big hug if they come by. And I'm not making light of that, but the reality is there's just no cash. So, all right, any questions from the committee? Yes, we have two. Who pushed first? Do we know? Okay. Then Representative Powell.
Mr. Attorney General. You know, I've always had a concern. You know, I thought for years we were making progress because of the way your department is organized and the meting out of legal services. And for years I thought we were making advances about getting away from the slags, and you know, a lot of that money that is being paid out to private attorneys. What do you think will be the impact of losing these 5 positions?
Well, first of all, let me say I do think we're making progress in the amount of SAG deals that we are having to pay each and every year. You will remember that in FY08, the legislature was kind enough to allow us to hire 20 new attorneys for the law department, got us up to 135 attorneys in the Attorney General's office. That has helped us save millions and millions of dollars and has more than paid for itself, because we know that every time we send an hour's worth of work out to a SAG, it costs us twice as much as it would cost to do it in-house. So in FY08, we saved almost $5 million as a result of what we knew would happen when we brought in those additional bodies. So I would say that process, we know that model works, but in these days and times and these budget constraints we have, it's not realistic to think that we're going to get that many more bodies to help us reduce the bills. And I think at the end of the day, what we've got to be mindful of is when we've got those lawyers in, to use them as best we can and just continue to try to hold down the outside costs. That's about all we can do. I don't think the model is broken. We just don't have the ability right now to take advantage of what we know works, which is bringing the work.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, we'll anticipate your recent submission to the budget, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Would y'all like me to announce the amount of the governor's recommended cut on your way up, or after you get up? Which is better? I know. All right. Next, we do have the Supreme Court. Madam Justice, I know. 80,000. Gives you a moment to gather the thoughts, I know.
Well, all right. It is a pleasure. Okay, I'm here.
Yeah, well, we agree, Madam Justice, believe me.
All right, that is a. Let me just say this: I know you all are working very, very hard, along with everybody else, to do what we need to do to make the state government go. The Supreme Court of Georgia needs more money. We're going painfully thin. I held back. All the other justices are on their way now to our annual retreat, which is with the State Bar of Georgia. Normally, naturally, that's a cost borne by the state, but we had to have the State Bar pay for our room and board and cut all of that and have to be able to work with them, the state bar. This time we've never had to do that. before. Our judges are not traveling. Our staff hasn't been traveling for a long time. We, too, are paying for supplies and bringing them in. You've heard all of this. We need more money. We're not here to ask for any money. Just a few things. We've reduced our staff by about 9% through attrition, by urging people to take advantage of retirements. One thing that we have been able to do, both courts, the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, we will be, as you know, increasing our filing fees, as you know. So we're being able to bring some revenue to state government, and I hope we get a kind of an attaboy for that as you look through the budget. Maybe a little more than an attaboy for that. And of course now, with respect to the bar examination, we have created a mechanism so that the bar is now self-sufficient, or will be self-sufficient very shortly. So we've been finding ways to not only to save money, but to raise revenue as well. Again, we're the #1 ranked Supreme Court in the country, working on a staff that has not grown since 1995, growing slimmer every day. So are there any questions? I have T. Barnes, our clerk here, will be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Gentlemen?
Can we do what? Wouldn't that be great? Or maybe hold somebody in contempt. Okay.
Maybe the legislature and the appropriations committee? I don't know.
No, I appreciate I do. I really appreciate all that you do. And I think you understand that we are really hurting, and we're working very, very hard to make these go. At a certain point, it'll be hard to make this court, maintain the quality that we had. I mean, there are all kinds of things we can go to limp along, but you really don't, in terms of justice, want limp along justice, because we've never been a fat organization.
Chairman Day? Do you have a question?
May I ask? Could you? Yes.
In the last year that we did statistics, it was about 1,860. That's all filings, the actual.
Our turnaround time is the fastest, as you know, in the country, because we have it's about 2 months and about a week, something like that. There are some. I hired a law clerk last year from the state of Kentucky who was so shocked at our turnaround time. Generally, their opinions took 18 months to 2 years. So, we really had to work with him to get him moving along. We have a constitutional 2-term rule that our cases have to be out by the 2nd term in the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. So we're the only state that has such a rule.
Representative Powell? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. If we didn't have that rule, we could probably make some changes. We could hire less experienced law clerks, less, if everybody was willing to go to a 1 or 2 year turnaround, we wouldn't need to have the staff that we do, but we do at this point. About taking off the, sure. If you really want to go, that would be going from the top to way down. That would reduce turnaround time and justice.
And that's constitutional?
It is constitutional. It would require a state constitutional amendment.
Representative Powell?
Thank you, Madam Chief Justice. During the supplemental, I was pretty well impacted and moved by some of the comments from one of your colleagues when he described the conditions over in the Supreme Court building. Elevators that didn't always work, water fountains that were covered with trash bags, no service contracts for your office equipment, these type of things. The system, the televideo system for presenting arguments to the court is not working. Is that correct?
That's correct. And there's nothing we can do better right now. We're just going to have to get along with what we have.
I guess the question, and I'm probably more embarrassed than I am anything on behalf of the citizens of this state, the situation that the highest court of this state, that we have justices that work under the conditions that y'all are working under. And I want to apologize to you and to the members, to your fellow members of the court. How much longer? Because you're on the way out. You've already announced your soon departure. But just straightforward, how long do you think that we can continue to operate the higher courts of this state under these conditions and still try to reach out to the better qualified jurist that will serve?
Not long at all. I am on my way out, but I am committed to the quality of the courts in this state. I'm a lawyer, and I'm a judge, and I'm a citizen of this state, and I'm embarrassed too. I can't tell you how many times I've had to bring in my book bag light bulbs to court so I could put my own light bulbs. I can't wait 3 weeks to get a light bulb put up. You know, I can't spend. How much do they charge to put up a picture? $50. I go to Dollar City and buy a little hook and put it up myself. It's not just the money that is charged, but it's the time. You know, it's an embarrassment. It's particularly an embarrassment to a state as progressive as the state of Georgia. You know, Georgia is a large state. It is respected throughout the country. It is our court is respected throughout the country. I really fear if people knew that these were the physical conditions that we actually operated in, we would go down in our rankings. So we're doing the intellectual work, and we're working really hard and working really fast, and I think our bar is very pleased with us, but the facility leaves a lot to be desired.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you.
And I appreciate your years of service.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we're really going to miss you, Madam Justice.
I'm going to miss you all, too.
Your leadership has just been supreme, and we greatly appreciate what you've done over there. Does the Supreme Court pay rent on the building to the GBA?
Yes.
Representative Powell, we might need to find out why the building authority isn't maintaining these properties to the level that they should be. And I think we might need to get the director of the GBA in here to look at that.
That would be nice. And by the way, our rent just keeps going up and up and up. And there is often not a corresponding increase in appropriations.
We'll take a look at see if we can't get GBA to maybe start paying a little more attention to maintenance and stuff that you guys need to do. That's their job. So we'll do that and try to hopefully get some of that pressure off you and some of the other agencies as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay. $80,870. If y'all can figure that out and let us know by Monday, then that way you get to make the selection rather than us.
Okay.
And I'd much rather it.
I understand. I understand, and I appreciate it.
You know your agency far better than legislators, and you don't need us meddling any more than we're required to.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you
yes,
very
ma'am.
much.
Thank you for coming over.
Representative, may I point out one thing?
Yes, ma'am.
We've been around in circles on the deduction of the health insurance, and I just wanted to point out again that for the court, we are, to our detriment, $16,547. The correct figure should be $204,389, not the $220,936 that the tracking sheet shows.
Thank you for bringing that to us. Our number cruncher has it. So thank you. Okay. Next, we have Superior Court, which should be page 10 on the tracking document. And let's see, the magic number for the Superior Court is $590,000 and for $590,403. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. We've already given you, Charles Miller, our financial director, is handing you out a summary sheet, and we've already put 59403 in red on the as a deduction. Madam Chairman, Steve Goss from Albany, President of the Council of Superior Court Judges. I'm here on behalf of the 202 elected trial judges, Superior Court judges in the state, and the senior judges who are on sabbatical right now due to the budget. Our FY10 base was $63,622,000, and according to the governor's revised budget with the reduction for the state health benefit plan contribution, our adjusted base going in will be $61,446,492. I would note, and I know that Mr. Miller and Kendra have been talking, we believe there to be a $206,102 overcalculation by OPB for the SHBP cut, and they will, I know, talk again tomorrow, and we'll get back with you on that. But they're working on it. Kendra and Charles are working on that. For our revised submission, one thing that I need you to put in several asterisks for the members, about 2/3 of the way down the page, it says "do not reduce." Please highlight that on the first page. As I mentioned at an earlier presentation, we have approximately $3.6 million that's not in the governor's budget. We had an error when we submitted in August. We learned of that in October, but it was too late to correct it at that point, according to OPB, and that represents two things. Number one, we have about $2 million that are payments under the old Emeritus Retirement Fund, which is the predecessor to JRS. I believe I was told we still have 27 folks, most of those widows of deceased judges, that are still receiving payments under that system. That is not a contribution from the state into a fund. That is a direct payment to those recipients. That's the way the old plan was set up. That money has to be restored. We are required by law to pay it. The other $1.6 million are pass-through funds. The state court judges, juvenile court judges, and state court solicitors. Historically, the state, the General Assembly, has made its part of the contributions, the state's contributions to the retirement system for those judges, and passed it through our budget. It's simply a conduit from the General Assembly to JRS. Due to this budget crisis, and when we started having to cut budgets and realized we had $1.5 million in our budget, it was not our money. That sort of brought this to a head. Senate Bill 109 passed out of committee yesterday. We have met with the state court judges, the juvenile court judges, council, and the solicitors, and there's a bill pending that will correct that next budget year. In other words, everybody's retirement will be in their own budget. But for now, for FY10, we have to have these $1.6 million restored so that the state makes the contributions to JRS for the state court judges, state court solicitors, and juvenile court judges. Now, that sounds like that's a daunting task to ask you for $3.6 million back that wasn't there, but we're more than cutting enough to offset that. Let me walk through that very quickly. From the governor's submission, there are 4 annualizers there. The $1.5 million, that was the clerk's fund, the council of clerks, it was clerk of superior courts, that was cut last year. That's the same amount. We're not offering any additional cuts. That's the same amount that was cut in FY9, just annualizing it into 10. There are 3 line items there, 6, the biggest one being the $669,000. That's the annualizing of the reduction of the FY09 COLA for all of our programs, for the Council of Superior Court Judges office here in Atlanta, for the administrative districts, and for the judges themselves. We're also showing a reduction that was not in the governor's budget of $1.575 million for senior judge money, or that may be a misnomer. It's actually for us to have additional judicial assistance. Basically, where we are right now, our typical budget, we have approximately $2.1 million in senior judge funds, which equates to about the workload of 14 active judges. If you added 14 active judges statewide, it would cost you about threefold that amount of money, because you're not having to pay secretaries, pay expenses, etc., benefits, etc. We have limped along, but as you know, I've talked to y'all previously about the situation we had in the Piedmont Circuit, where we had 2 of our 3 judges out on extended post-surgical medical leave, and it just really points out the vulnerability we have. When we have people out sick, having surgery, etc., we have nowhere to turn. So we're still offering up what would essentially be a 75% line item cut there in that budget line item. We were requesting, it shows an additional $80,000 in travel, but in actuality that is a $169,000 cut from the governor's submission. The 80 is what we need to fully fund. That's what we were short to fully fund a year of. When I say travel, we're talking about mileage for me to come up here today on state business, for the circuit riders to go from county A to county B to county C to hold court. Request funds for equipment. We've not had any equipment funds for anything. No computers, no anything. FY08, FY09, and we were asking for some to be put in for 10 in case things started breaking down. The governor's submission, we had asked for $714,000. We're agreeing to cut that an additional $512,000, leaving us with $202,000, which is essentially $1,000 per elected judge in the state, in case they have computers or other copiers, etc., fail. And again, that's the first equipment money we've had in 3 fiscal years, if we get it. I've already mentioned to you about the pass-through. We have already figured in absorbing the $590,403 cut the governor announced this week. We'll do that from a mixture of freezing positions, reducing some further operating expenses, and possibly reducing some of the numbers we have above. We will get with Kendra by Monday and tell you how to spread it over the 3 programs. When you get to the bottom line, or next to the bottom line, we're at $57,353,000, which is within 0.1% of what the governor's submission would be, including the additional 1% cut. Now, one additional thing that I will be talking with y'all in the coming days about, we're asking for an additional $1.15 million for the 3 judgeships. Now, the reason I put it in the budget, there is a statute that y'all passed last year that creates 3 new judgeships effective July 1, 2009 in the Alcovy Circuit, the Brunswick Circuit, and the Atlanta Circuit. And so if those positions get filled, we have to make payroll. And we've put the money in there, but that cannot come out of our existing base. We cannot fund 205 judgeships on the money before the cuts that we were funding 202 with. It's just mathematically impossible. So I understand that could be an issue that needs further discussion, but we're showing it there. We're not including that in the cuts because, again, we cannot absorb it. But for right now, we know the judges are coming online in a few months, and we had to put them in the budget for them. So, any questions?
Any questions from the committee members? Excellent presentation. No questions. We'll just anticipate and you get with Ms. Mitchell and ripping out another $500,000. Thank you, Your Honor. Next, we have the appellates. And let's see, where do we have our appellate?
Page 4.
What about on here? Oh, there we go. Okay. Some have court first and some. Oh, thank you. Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes. You know what your magic number is? $133,547.
Yes, ma'am.
In brackets.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I'm here to say that when the going gets tough, the tough get going.
Yes, ma'am.
And I am ready, willing, and able to take care of that $133,000.
Yeah, that's the attitude we like. Thank
Okay.
you. We like the appellates.
And now don't get us confused with Mikey. We eat a lot. We can't eat everything. Okay. But we are the Court of Appeals, and I want to make your job easier. Again, I'm Yvette Miller, the new chief of the Georgia Court of Appeals, and I want to remind you, you've just heard from our most wonderful Supreme Court and from the spokesman for our Superior Courts. So let me put a plug in for the most wonderful appellate court in the nation. We're the busiest appellate court in the nation, and we are the smallest, one of the smallest appellate courts in the nation. We're 12 strong, and we do the work of 60 plus. If we were in the state of Florida, it would take 60 men and women to do what my 11 colleagues and myself do. So that ought to give you pause right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm standing here ready, willing, and able to take that additional $133,000 cut. Okay?
Thank you, Judge Miller.
So we can take the $133,547. We're at the $1,389,722, which is 6%. In addition to all the statewide changes, which takes us up to 7%. And we're willing to do that on behalf of the citizens of this state. But again, I don't think we can run the state of Georgia without the Georgia Court of Appeals. You know, we hear 86% of all the cases that come from the trial court come to the Court of Appeals. They don't go to the Supreme Court. They can't go back down to the Superior Court, to the trial courts. They got to come somewhere. They go to the Georgia Court of Appeals. Mm-hmm. And we like Mikey, you know, we eat them. We hear them, we decide them, and we decide them in a good way. We make quality decisions. And I'm also proud to say when you flip it over, it's very humbling. I'm not bragging. It's very humbling. You know, when I took the oath, I was very humbled to learn that not only do we decide them, only 10% of the cases that are decided by my court ultimately go on certiorari to the Georgia Supreme Court. So not only do I decide the cases, in most instances they're final decisions. So we have to be good and we have to be right because our citizens are dependent upon that. So what I want to say to you is we want to work with you, and we have been. We were the first agency to cut people. We laid off some people. I was not the chief at that time, but I'm here to tell you on behalf of the previous chief that that was what was done, and it was a prudent thing at that time. So what I want to say about 2010 is we know this is a bad cycle, and we know that you all do a fantastic job. And, I mean, really, your job is made real tough right now because of this economic cycle. So we want to do our part. But we do need to have our e-filing, and we need the licensure. And I heard the chief say, and she's so right, the e-filing, the filing fees. That was something that I said to this chairman in this body and to the Senate. Mm-hmm. And she's so right. We need more than an attaboy. The Court of Appeals definitely needs more than an attaboy because we had over 3,300 filings of appeals last year. And that, you know, takes a whole lot more to handle that than some other dockets, shall we say. So we need to make certain that our dockets can handle the work and that we can provide a system where the lawyers don't have to all travel to Atlanta so that we can start the e-filing process. So this money that we're giving y'all, that we're doing without, that we're buying resources, our judges are not traveling, only the ones under that statute where they live a certain geographic area, those are the only people that are getting any money. Everybody else is doing without. So we're just asking that you return us the money for the e-filing so that we can do what we have to do. And we have to do all those cases like the Supreme Court, 3 times as many, all within the same 2-term constitutional requirement. Now, for us, if you want to disband the constitutional requirement, that would be tough. And I don't even want to go down that road. We don't want to go down that road. So I'm going to close my mouth on that and say we appreciate you all, and hopefully you appreciate our court. And if there's anything we can ever do for any of you, just let us know. And appreciate your time today. Are there any questions?
It looks like Representative Powell has a question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Justice.
Yes.
And y'all do have an extraordinary track record, even despite the fact you have my friend John Ellington up there with you.
Thank you.
I had questioned the Chief Justice a while ago about comments that was made during the supplemental about the condition,
Yes.
the physical condition of the court, water fountains, elevators, and such. Could you tell me a little bit, or tell this committee a little bit about the conditions y'all are working under?
It's deplorable. But frankly, I was one of those judges that started out in the health building, which was absolutely horrible. I mean, I was convinced that it was a toxic building because, I mean, I had sinusitis almost every week. I mean, it was just something in that building, the smell. I don't know if they had embalmed bodies there or whatever. But John Ellington will tell you, we were suite mates, and we were sick half of the time.
Yeah, I know. We tried to keep him over there.
I know. But we're so happy to be, as we call it, in the big building, that we grew up and y'all let us come to the big building. But now that we're in the big building, we can't drink the water. The cheap is right. I mean, we don't have light bulbs a lot of time. We don't have adequate resources, and everybody just apologizes about GBA. Look, if I was in charge of the whole thing, it would be run differently because I wouldn't put up with it. But, I'm just a little chief. I've got the people on the 4th floor, and because I think it's ridiculous. If I were my client, I would say, well, hell, don't pay the rent, excuse my expression, because it's just ridiculous. Who is running this show? When I run the show, I get the show right. I don't mess around, and I don't understand it. But my fiscal officer says there's some law or some reason. But I know laws were made by honorable men and now honorable women, Madam Chair, and we make those laws for a reason. And it's not to torture people. It's for a good reason. And I think that yesterday, for example, we had so many people here at the Capitol, and some ladies were here from all over the state, and some people, I'm originally from Macon, and they were here. And I am embarrassed to bring people into our judicial building. One elevator's broken. There's the place is not clean. There's no water you can drink. I've got to constantly go to Costco and buy, the big cases of water so that people don't fall out and don't have anything to drink.
Can you tell me a little bit about the water? Everybody keep hearing about the water. Do y'all not have water fountains, or is it something that is wrong?
I wouldn't suggest anybody drink any of that water because I'm afraid they're going to die. I mean, really, and we have a joke about the satellite office. Only when you take your laptop home or go to Georgia State or someplace will you have adequate resources. We do this because, we love what we do. I love being an appellate court judge, but that is where our facility is. We need to tear the whole thing down and start over again. But at the very least, we could just get somebody to come and talk to us. And I really think that, Liz is a chief, but, if she says, Yvette, run it, now I'll get somebody over there, or we'll be sitting talking to Channel 5 or somebody about why we can't get, because the judiciary is the third branch. And I think we ought to have a good facility for the work that we do, for the people that we invite in. I mean, it's the citizens' house of justice, and it's deplorable. It's deplorable.
What other offices are in that building besides the Supreme
Well,
Court?
the Attorney General is there, and I haven't spent a lot of time down there, but I bet they have some of the same problems. But see, they don't have to go up very high, and what goes up must come down. But if you don't have to go up very high, maybe it's not as bad. But see, our courtrooms are on the 6th floor, so we do, and that's the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals. But the Supreme Court is on the 5th floor, and we're on the 4th floor. And it's just bad news. We've got a judge who's been sick. you know, and we're not, you know, we're not handicapped. You know, we don't have. It's just bad. It's not ADA or anything like that. You know, we do the best that we can, and we don't come over here begging. At least I'm here to tell you what I can do, because I'm a lawyer. You know what I mean? First and foremost, and I'm here to tell you I've been feeling more like a lawyer as a chief judge than I have felt like a judge, because I feel like I have to be an advocate for my judges and for the people, and we can do better.
What's the condition of your office equipment and those type of things?
It's pretty fair. It's pretty fair. I mean, you know, it could be better, but
Y'all have the same system for the tele.
well, we're the only agency that does not have Word. We have Word Perfect, and I was talking to Jan about that today, and she said that, you know, Judge, we'll try to get that for you, but I think I better sit down and be quiet because they don't want me to say any more. But I'm probably telling too much truth. But I just really feel like, you know, we handle all these appeals, and we ought to at least have what the Superior Court judges have. You know, my parents taught me that it gets better the higher up you go, not the reverse. So, you know, people are starting to look down now, but that's the way it ought. That's the way it ought to be. You know, when I left Fulton County as a state court trial judge, when I moved here, when the governor swore me in, I had to make certain that it wasn't demotion, because my office was smaller and there was a leak and everything. I couldn't believe it. You know, I had to say a strong prayer, you know, and I made it through that first year, and I said, okay, it's going to be all right. But we can do better.
You certainly can.
You know, and if you will help me, we will do better.
Mm-hmm. I know that Representative Day has a question. Representative Powell, are you satisfied? Okay. Do you happen to know how much y'all paid GBA in rent?
Yes, I do.
Now, that's highway rock.
Yeah. Especially in today's real estate market, isn't it? All right, so if y'all are paying $700, or just under $700, how much is the Supreme Court paying on that? Do we know?
Y'all have to pay according to the, you know, whatever building you're. For instance, I pay a higher rate of rent for the health building versus the judicial building because it's not considered renovated. But it's based on our square footage, and I think all state agencies have to pay the same amount.
Okay. Ms. Mitchell, would you be able to calculate just how much the judicial building is bringing in rents to GBA for us and let us know?
I have a list of how much everybody.
Okay, because I know everybody that's in that building, and then maybe separate out those that are in satellite offices, so we can just see just how much GBA is collecting on their behalf, and then we're going to go ask them where that money's going. Okay? And Judge Miller, thank you for being so forthright. I know we've got more questions down here. And
Yes, sir.
I don't have a question, but I would like to, I'd like to ask the honorable chair lady of this committee if she might could talk with the chairman of the committee, that one at our meeting next week, that if y'all could summon the GBA director over here with a set of books and explanations why the hell the courts, highest courts of this state are paying such a rent and then are having to work under such deplorable conditions.
well, I agree, Representative Powell, and also want to find out why the state patrol's in the same situation with their headquarters, and GBI has some situations as well. So I think that's an excellent idea, and going forth without that information, we can't make proper decisions. Are you satisfied, Representative Powell? I know that Chairman Day has been very patient here with us.
Yes, sir. Mhm. 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 Okay. Well, call me and let me escort you into the building. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think we're all in consensus about the deplorable condition of the building, and thank you for being forthright and bringing it to us.
We're in the 21st century.
Well, And we're going to try to keep us there, too, I
right.
think.
That's right.
Any other questions for the Chief Judge? Thank you, Judge Miller. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Appreciate you all.
And we'll anticipate y'all getting with Kendra for your magic deduction.
But now don't forget about us though now on the enhancements, because we're giving and we want to receive as good as we give. But you know, only new cars.
Don't we have a great Chief Judge? Oh, shit. Okay. For the committee members, juvenile courts is on page 8 of the tracking document, and the juvenile court's magic deduction is $17,056.
And that was a very tough act to follow.
I think it will be for all of us.
I can't be entertaining, I'm sorry. I think we have brown water in our building, but we don't go through GBA. So, the number that you spoke of, the governor's additional reduction, we're going to have to take those in furloughs. We've cut our budget down as far as we can, and that'll equal out to about 5 days that all of our staff will have to take a furlough day. So pretty much the rest of our budget are the reductions that were initially put out by the governor.
Any questions from the committee? Well, please take our greetings back to the staff and thank them for the sacrifice that they're making on behalf of all of Georgia. And I'm earnest and serious about that. Thank you.
Great.
At least
Thank
they
you
have
for
jobs.
everything that you do, too.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. Prosecuting Attorneys Council and the District Attorneys. Prosecuting attorneys have, $581,000 is their magic number. Okay, page 9 on the tracking document for committee members. Is this the only subtract that we've got for them?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. I'm Tommy Floyd, the District Attorney for the Flint Circuit and the Chairman of the Prosecuting Attorneys Council. I just want to remind the committee of some things you already know. I'm not going to go through this. If you have any questions, you can certainly ask me about it. In the District Attorney's portion of the budget any year, 98% of our budget is salaries. The other 2% is travel. We have circuits as large as 8 counties that the district attorneys and their staff have to travel to. Some of us are fortunate to have one county circuits, and we don't use, unless we're chairman of the Prosecuting Attorneys Council, we don't use too much of our travel. But that is what makes up our budget. We have started already in September furloughing all state employees for 1 day a month, statewide. That's Prosecuting Attorneys Council staff and assistant district attorneys, secretaries, and investigators throughout the state. The council met Tuesday, and we are having to, because of the state of the 09 budget, having to furlough 2 days in all state employees, DAs, employees, and Prosecuting Attorneys Council for the months of March, April, and May, and we're holding June in reserve to see. We know we'll have to do at least 1 day in June, maybe more, just to get us through to July the 1st. It is our hope, we're aware of the figure that you gave us, it is our hope that we can stop the furloughs. That is, our people have taken that very well, surprisingly so. They understand it. They don't like it, neither do we. But if we have to continue it, the longer we have to continue it, I mean, I don't have to tell you that morale is not the greatest in the world. But we all know the economy is in bad shape. We are realists about this. We have, from the very beginning, anticipated this day, frankly, and have done what we have been requested to do. We've done it as prudently as we can. On the prosecuting attorney side of the ledger, we have just canceled the Westlaw contract. That is one of the research tools that we use and provide some of the prosecutors in the field out in the DA's offices. Some prefer LexisNexis. As these contracts come due, we are looking at them, and very likely, unless you give us the money to proceed with them, going to cancel because we can't afford them. And we're doing everything we can to try to avoid any more layoffs after June the 30th, but if again, we don't have anywhere to cut, if we have to furlough, we'll just continue. We hope to minimize it if we can't stop it. We're bleeding now. We need a Band-Aid. You're the doctor. Question?
Yes, sir. We understand. Subcommittee have any questions? I apologize to the folks that are here in the audience and my fellow subcommittee members for me having to run around, but I was called over to across the street. I'm glad that I got back for your presentation. I've told you this when I came up to meet with your folks back last fall, and I think on several times. Nobody likes to have to deal with this, but I don't know that anybody in state government has done a better job at it.
Thank you.
And I appreciate the fact you did that. Now, I will tell you, I've gotten probably a dozen emails in the last 24 hours that said that we needed to cut the special stipend you get for all the extra work you do.
I know. I just doubled my salary.
I'm looking for a lot lighthearted moment since you have to carry. No, and I appreciate that fact. I mean, you have to come down here, and you've been down here several times during this budget process, and I know. I just know you personally, and I'm just guessing, that time gets made up on Saturdays and weekends when you still, haul your caseload around. And I appreciate. I know, seriously speaking, I know your fellow DAs appreciate your representation.
I appreciate.
I have a couple of questions, if you would take them.
Absolutely.
Chairman Chambers.
I just wanted you to go back to the staff and tell them thank you for the sacrifices they're making on behalf of the state of Georgia. And I know morale can't be great, but thank goodness they've got jobs with benefits, and that's something that a lot of folks don't have anymore.
They know that, and they do not blame you all.
I know.
Chairman Martin can tell you, he came to one of our meetings, and they know this is not something that's created by the legislature. They're all grown folks, but we're hoping to do the best we can. We're not the highest paid lawyers in the state in the first place, and we're trying to at least maintain what we have.
Well, we do greatly appreciate your work, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Let me ask you a question. With these budget cuts and the disruptions that it's going to create ripple down throughout the entire criminal justice system and prosecution,
yes,
what other effects, unintended consequences do you see, such as will we wind up incurring a higher cost on indigent defense?
Well, I'm not sure how to calculate all that. With a downturn in the economy, I know it just yesterday evening they caught a fellow that had robbed 9 or 10 banks in middle Georgia. Crime goes up, and I don't want to stand up here and tell you something you already know. Criminals don't take a furlough, and our business has gone up. I can't give you the numbers. They're not at my fingertips, but our business is going up gradually and dramatically. And while our morale is good under the circumstances, there is right beneath the surface a great deal of contempt. I mean, the only reason it has not surfaced is because they're adults and they understand. But that cannot help but bleed over into those Saturdays that they come up there when they weren't paid even before furloughs. I mean, they're furloughed, but they're still doing the work. They're getting it done. And I have not heard, I have been at all the council meetings, all the DA's meetings, and I have not heard a DA or an assistant DA seriously say, we're going to stop court. That's not what we do. We're going to be there if you don't pay us, I suspect. I know I'll be there on behalf of the Flint Circuit if all my people quit. That's what I'm elected to do. But we're asking you to do your best, and I know you have done your best for us. I know y'all have been a very friendly committee to us, and we appreciate that, and we recognize it. To try to stop these furloughs if you can. We're cutting everything else. We're cutting it to the bone. We're not traveling any more than we absolutely have to, and we're going to continue to do that. If you can help us with these furloughs, we will feel like we were extremely successful.
Subcommittee have further questions? Again, we appreciate it. I mean, you're aware of the additional reduction, and I heard you refer to the non-agreement. I'll just go say that we have left on 2009, and we're pretty firm on where we want to try to keep you on that, and we're working with the Senate as well as I see Judge Gosbeck, they're shaking your head, sir. We've got some work we're doing with them on that. I understand they undid something. I hope with additional information, talking with the House Budget Office, that they'll see the right to put that back so that we handle that. But we want to do this, and let me say this, because I was gone. I've mentioned to ACCG and GMA and some of the other folks in law enforcement. We have sort of an issue of for lack of a better term, a crime continuum. I mean, from the time the offense is incurred to the investigation starts, to through court, through incarceration, through post-incarceration treatment, pardons and paroles, and any sort of substance abuse that goes with it. We have this thing out there, and as times get tough, and the budget's squeezed, we find ourselves trying to watch the state money and pulling back in certain areas that requires the locals, if you will, to spend more money. And all the tax money in general comes from Georgians. Some come from outside folks that come through, but I don't believe in this concept of local dollars. I think they're all coming from Georgians. I'm going to hopefully work with get the opportunity to work with Chairman Harmon and the Senate, Chairman Hill, so that we can kind of look at that and make sure when we're saving $1 at the state, we're not costing $1 and the dime at the local level, or when we're saving $1 in the DA's office, we're not costing the superior courts and the public defenders and the other folks, $1.10 extra because we're having to go and do things. And we'll look for you folks to help us do that, because I got to think there's ways that we could work on things and make sure that when we're saving dollars in one system or on one level of government, that we make sure that we're not costing another level of government 110% of that. So we look forward to borrowing a little bit of the time that you don't have to help us try to do that. We really appreciate it.
And let me say, too, I told you personally, Chairman Martin, that we appreciate what you all did for us in the 2009 budget. And while I realize the Senate hadn't, it'll go in conference committee. I know that took the entire committee to do that. I sent an email to Chairman Harvin. I hadn't had a chance to see him personally. We recognize that. We appreciate it, and all our people know that.
You bet. Well, we appreciate it. If there are no further questions, we'll go on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, I believe yesterday afternoon you and Chairman Harvin asked me if I could have the chairman of my council here today, and he isn't here. I have a letter.
Director Crawford, we're going to try to give the chairman of the Public Defender Standards Council an opportunity to get on his schedule later before the budget process. I think it's important. I appreciate the kind of correspondence, and I understand he is a working attorney and has other obligations. It's not a full-time job, so we're going to give Mr. Dubose an opportunity to get with the subcommittee later. But we'll take the letter under advisement and look forward to your presentation. We'll certainly give him an opportunity to come forward.
Mr. Chairman, also you have passed out, Marcus Smith, our budget director, has passed out to you a fully funded budget is requested by the council and instructed by the staff to prepare for the council at their January the 23rd meeting. And you will see that it's a $12 million increase over the governor's recommendation. The staff was asked to go through and to prepare a fully funded constitutional budget. And this is what you have a copy of, which is a $12 million more than the governor recommended. And I'll be glad to go through it and discuss it with you, or however how you wish to proceed. I also, Mr. Chairman, you and I have had a private conversation with Chairman Harbin of the situation that has now happened as of today, and I feel like I have to make the committee aware of. When I went over to Public Defenders, I had a question concerning the conflict program. Our Circuit Public Defender program of delivery of services works and works very well. That, along with the Capital Defender main program, comprises 95-96% of this program. It works efficiently, and it works effectively for the Circuit Public Defenders of the 43 circuits that we represent. I had a question, and the question that I have had since I've been there, from having come from this committee, is how do you pay your unknown liabilities from previous budgetary fiscal years in the present budget year? At 1 o'clock today, there was a special report on the offices of the Georgia Circuit Public Defenders that was released by audits. Audits and the Attorney General and I have been working for the last 6 weeks, I would say. Approximately 6 weeks ago, I was put on notice by audits and the Attorney General's office that there was a problem. And that problem was the situation of the conflict cases. Our conflict cases are the cases where multiple defendants are represented by public defenders or contract public defenders who are private attorneys, or through the contracts, or through the conflict offices across the state. What has come back, and I will have for you in just a minute, they're making copies, and I'm sorry I don't have them all here right now, but I'll have them for you very, very shortly, is I have what we anticipate our liabilities from previous years. We've been working on this for quite a while. Beginning July the 1st of 2008, Larry Snyder came to work with this agency, and Larry was the Circuit Public Defender, as some of you know, in DeKalb County. Our conflicts have not been there was quite a controversy about how many conflict cases we had this time of last year. Now we have two different kinds of conflict cases. The C3 cases that are private attorneys, the CP cases that are either contract or being the CP, most of the CP cases are represented by conflict offices. There was in our C3 cases last April, I kept thinking we're showing 9,200 cases, active cases in our database known as JCADS. The Circuit Public Defenders stepped up to the plate. At that time, they had been told, if you conflict out by this agency, if you conflict out a case, you're never to look at it, touch it again. Our Circuit Public Defenders will each send a list of the open conflict cases in their circuits. They did a marvelous job. We did what I call a hands-on audit. They went to the courthouses and looked to see if that case was closed, whether it was closed in our database or whether it was still open in our. We took the open cases from our database, sent it to each Circuit Public Defender. They went to all the courthouses in the state and they pulled them for us to see if they were closed. Now, there were a lot of them that were closed that had not been billed to this agency by the local attorneys. So in October of this past year, I sent a letter. We did not even know who all the attorneys were. We sent out approximately 700 letters to attorneys, private attorneys across the state, saying if you have, your name is appearing as representing a conflict attorney in our database, please send us your estimated amount of funding that would be needed for this case and your completion dates and so forth. We only got, out of those 30, when we did that hands-on audit, we went from 9,200 cases to 4,500 cases. We only got response to about 700 of those 4,500 cases by attorneys. Well, I had already asked the governor's office in the spring of last year to ask audits to do this, and it's called a special report. It's not an audit. The chairman has a copy in his hand. I think I will have you copies, maybe not before you leave here, but I'll have you copies of them. It was posted this afternoon at 1 o'clock on audit's website. The situation that we find ourselves in, though, we had 4,500 cases. We were not even sure in what year those cases were sent to private attorneys. We thought we knew. So what we have done for since November, we've been working on this. But what we did in the last 2 weeks was we basically, and I have staff here that can answer questions, we basically pulled every staff person we could pull off of this and put onto this situation what are our known liabilities as of right now. What we got was we sent back to the circuit public defenders again and asked them, would you please help us by putting together for us another audit. They stepped up to the plate, and in about a week's time we did another hands-on audit. We're right at 2,500 conflict cases presently open. I'm going to pass out to you Mr. Chairman, if you will bear with me, I would like to try to explain to you what you have in front of you. We broke all of the conflict cases into 11 different categories. You will see them. Those 11 categories are listed per fiscal year. You will see a liability, a number of open cases, and it goes in 09 to 08, 07, 06, and back to 05. You will notice from 2005 we have 97 presently open cases that were sent to conflict attorneys in 05. You will see the summary total of all fiscal years there and what the projected liability is at the bottom of that page. Now, to help you realize how we got to that is we started in July of this past year tracking what we were paying attorneys and what attorneys were billing us. You will see at the bottom of the second page, which is not numbered, average cost per case. That is what we are being billed from July of 08 till January 1 of this present year. That is the average cost per case to conflict attorneys. We took those numbers, applied them back to each year by the 11 categories to get the known liabilities. The bottom line of the audit is this. This agency, according to the Attorney General and the meetings with the Attorney General, is that this agency has created a debt of the state that possibly exceeds the appropriated amounts. What should have happened is any time a case in 2006, 7, 8, whatever, was appointed to a private attorney, the money to pay for that case should have been encumbered at that time and set aside in that budgetary year. And it is very clear in this report. It says that those monies should be set aside regardless of what year they would be paid in. And it wasn't done. We created a hole and a deficit for this agency for 09 budget and how to go forward in the 010. I'll tell you all of this to bring you back to, I will be glad to go through what I passed out as the budget. Now, I also have for you, and I have the same scenario in the capital cases. Now, the capital cases are much easier to be able to identify. Let me tell you, the REVO is revocational felony, revocational juvenile, revocation misdemeanor on the first document I gave you. The capital cases, you will see fiscal year listed. I have blanked out the case name for protection here, but you will see what the total liabilities are, and you will see the contract amounts and in what year they should have been booked, but they necessarily were not booked as a liability or an encumbrance on our balance sheet. I'll be more than glad to go back through with you the $12 million request that the agency has if you wish to go through it line by line, or we have done many things such as the DAs and all have done in we've done furloughs, we've done renegotiation of contracts, trying to renegotiate and move out of office space that we're paying as much as $20.60 a square foot back into state space. We're trying to renegotiate everything we can to limit travel. We have done furloughs. The main objective, though, has been throughout all of the budget reductions that we've done so far is to try to keep the core services of the agency, and that means the superior courts in this state, moving as efficiently and effectively by representing the clients as we can without taking, and we've taken more reductions in central office and staff and trying to keep the monies going to the clients. Now, I'll be more than glad to go through the $12 million enhancements if you wish for me to, or I'll be glad to try to go through the tracking document, page 44.
Director Crawford, let me check with the committee members and see if they have any questions yet on what you presented so far. I've got a quick question. Reading through very, very quickly on the special report, it states that you're not being billed until after the case is completed.
Yes, that is what has been happening. Now, that isn't necessarily true. That's true probably in 85 to 90% of the cases. Now, there have been few that have had interim bills. The process, if I could walk you through, and if you will look, if you have it in front of you, Representative Chambers, there is on page 9 an example of exactly what you're asking that is included in this report, of how that
this report?
Of that report on page 9, there's an example that audits placed in the report of an example of how a private attorney in 2006 was contracted with a case for the case. Now, the contracting of this agency has not been through central office. It's been that if a circuit public defender in your home judicial district declared a conflict, they sent it to a conflict attorney. And all that was done was JCATS, and I'm not blaming the circuit public defenders. Now, let me tell you, they're not the ones to blame in this. But circuit public defenders would be going to Representative Powell, if he was an attorney, and saying, would you take this case to represent Jill Chambers? And then what would happen is the next thing that it would be entered into our JCATS, which is our database that you'd been appointed, whatnot, next thing we get is 3 years later a bill, and it's being paid at $45 out of court, $60 in court, and there was no, what I would call a voucher system. There was no master agreement with that attorney, and there was no known way to establish the liability for that case as far as an obligation of the state or this agency's obligation to set aside or encumber monies. So what we've been doing basically is operating on a cash flow system instead of a governmental accrual accounting program. And it is going to cause us some major headaches, and I hope not cause the courts any major headaches, but it's going to cause, I'm sorry, possibly y'all some major headaches too of how we go forward.
Director Crawford, knowing that you've not been there through the whole history of this agency, but why in the world would they practice this or do their budgets this way when the Constitution clearly says they're not allowed to? I mean, they've been operating unconstitutionally this entire time in how they deal with their billing?
I don't think they were operating intentionally unconstitutional. I think it was from the hastily way that this agency was set up in a short period of time. And at the time that this agency was set up, this agency was not did not handle its physical affairs. It was done, AOC was the physical agent, and it was all being done through AOC. And at that time, the AOC would just pay the bills, and it would be booked against the liabilities, but it was not being encumbered. It was booked against the assets, the appropriated amount. It was not being booked as an encumbrance against the appropriated dollars. There's a part of the statute that says the director shall ensure that the council does not exceed the amounts appropriated for the agency. And that's why I question, how do you know what your liabilities are at any point? Now, in meeting with the Attorney General through this process in their office, they're billed monthly. If they use a SAG as Special Attorney General, they're billed monthly. They know where their liabilities are at no later than probably a 45-day period. And we never have known what our liabilities are until a final bill has been received.
Do you think that's why the chairman didn't want to come and face us in person today?
Madam Chairman, you'd have to ask the chairman. The chairman did not see this report.
Right.
I have gone over it with Chairman DuBose, but the copy that I was given of this remained the property and in the custody of audits until today, and I have not disseminated, was not given permission to disseminate this. Now, he should have received a copy, he and the rest of the council should have received a copy of this either electronically today or audits was mailing it to each council member yesterday. So in his defense, I cannot answer that for him.
Thank you.
We're going to give him, all the benefit of the doubt in that I think he had prior commitments
That's right,
for
I think
tomorrow,
so.
and perhaps wasn't. I think from the email I received last night at midnight, he was confused as to the timing of the meeting today. So we'll give him the opportunity to do that.
Our staff, and I take the opinion that no one in this agency works for me, that we all work together. And I want you to know that our staff is available at any time that you have a question. I don't care when it is. We will have someone over here and try to answer it for you to the best of our knowledge. I'll be, like I said, there's a handout with a $12 million enhancement for 2010 that includes funding juvenile positions, funds that ask for parity for DA with the DAs. That probably could be removed. The question goes back, is very fundamental. How does the constitutional right of the defendant equal dollars? And I think that is the underlying factor that is so hard to try to establish. And the only way to do it is off the historical data. And we did not have that historical data to the beginning of July of last year. And since July of last year, we've tracked every case. Now, we have not paid attorneys necessarily, conflict attorneys, 100% on the dollar. We have tried to take and reduce some of these bills to try to meet our appropriated dollars commitment from you to match the liabilities. Now, you will see in here, or I have it, it may not have been in the one I just gave you, we have paid out of 09 monies that should have been encumbered in 05 through 08. And we've got to decide how, we've got to sit down with you, the legislature, the leadership, or whoever, both House and Senate, and try to decide how do we go forward without creating any crisis, because what I don't want to happen, we need these conflict attorneys. We've got to have these conflict attorneys. They're afraid that they're not going to be paid by the state. When this report comes out, or when the report is out, we don't need a wholesale withdrawal of attorneys in conflict cases if they were appointed prior to this fiscal year. And the same thing in the capital cases that are very expensive. I've got to be in court in the morning in one of them to try to talk to the judges to try to assure them that we can try to figure out how to keep the defense for the conflict and the experts moving. But it's just sort of ironic that this report came out today, and y'all are meeting this afternoon, and I will get each of you a copy of it. Or it is on audit's website, but it's not under an audit. You have to look under report.
I have a question, and again, I wanted to see Judge Goss and D.A. Floyd as they left. I have a question for you, Greg Crawford. Help me and help the subcommittee, if you can, understand the process on a conflict case. If you have a identified conflict, which could be, you have two defendants that you have to defend, two bad actors perpetrated the same or accused of the same crime. Oftentimes they would be represented by different defense attorneys, because he who speaks first might get the best deal, if you will. If we watch too much crime drama on TV, I'm sure, but I think that's a valid reason for the conflict, is it not? I mean, are you representing?
Well, they may have competing interests,
sure,
as far as the defense.
Exactly.
In the same case.
Yeah, in that case, would our circuit office defend one of the defendants, and you would only conflict out the other one?
That is the normal practice, unless there is some reason that, and in very rare instances, they may have to conflict them both out for some reason, but
okay.
Normally.
But so the conflict part, would it be a fair statement that the one that we would keep in, that would get a constitutionally adequate defense, the one that we would conflict out, might cost more?
Oh yes, because
how much more might it cost? I mean, and how does one decide? Is it you call up attorney A out there on the phone that's on the conflict list and and you say to them, I have this case and need you to do it. Prior to you being involved, was that just, we need you to come down to jail and meet with defendant Y, and you just start billing us?
That's still going on as of today.
But you don't talk rates? You don't talk?
Yes, the rates are set. $45 out of court, $60 in court for the private attorneys. But what we have seen, and it's rare now, it's not a given, but we have seen where you get investigative costs where the private attorney may hire an investigator, and we've only had one that was this way that I'm aware of in reviewing them. But we had an investigator that charged more than the attorney did.
And I apologize, I misspoke. Not that you don't negotiate rates, but you don't negotiate. But prior to your involvement in this, you didn't negotiate a cap on the fee.
No, there are no caps or no flat fees.
So there are no flat. So you may have, you could have the same. Do you have any cases that, of which you're aware, where these same cases were adjudicated sometimes in the same courtroom with two separate defense attorneys there, and you kind of know the hours spent on defendant X, and then you were billed for the hours spent on defendant Y? I mean, are those disparate? Are they similar?
That happens occasionally, where maybe you as a private attorney have 3 private cases and 5 appointed cases, and we have seen, and we've gone through and cut bills, where we have seen in one particular area of the state where we were being billed 5 times for the same hour. In other words, on each case, we were billed maybe 2 hours in court, when the total time was only 2 hours in court, but it was billed 5 times as 2 hours for 10 hours in court. Yeah, it doesn't happen with every. I don't want you to leave
Sure.
me the impression that this happens in every case, but yeah, there are all kind of things such as this that have been happening, and since July we have been trying to look at all at review. Larry Snyder has been reviewing these bills, and we've been trying to look at all the bills that one attorney may send in to see if that type thing is being done.
So, and I agree with you. I don't want to say that one bad act or one particular instance certainly tarnishes the whole process. But it would seem to me that if one was billed on an as-you-go basis for a case, you would have the ability to track the expenditures as opposed to just getting them all at the end. I have additional questions, but I mean they're kind of getting down into more details, and we don't have to do that today. Subcommittee have any further questions in regards to this? Yes, sir.
I appreciate it. I make a lot of mistakes. I appreciate it. And we will try. That's why if you have any questions, if we tell you something that's wrong, it's unintentional. And if we tell you something that's wrong and any of the staff realizes that we have told you something wrong, we will come back and tell you, we'll admit to you we made a mistake. I mean, we all do.
And I've only gotten it today, but the quote, fully funded budget request by the council from January 23rd, 2009.
Yes, sir.
Just real quick, did I hear you say somewhere in here that the council is asking for salary increases for attorneys?
Yes, sir.
I just want to get that on the record. In a time where the district attorney's office is being asked to do the same job they have in defending people and furlough people, the council thinks that they want to give people raises. Is that correct?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think in defense of the council, I think I could speak for the council, and I'm not sure about this now, but I think what they're wanting to do is also just make it aware every year the difference in the pay for the circuit public defenders, and just keep it on the front burner with you.
Would that be a lot like the difference? And I don't mean to cut you off,
No.
Crawford. I certainly don't mean to be discourteous when I say that.
No.
But would that also follow into making us aware that over 10,000 corrections officers and over 200 GBI agents had raises that were approved by this body that not only are they having to forego those in this budget, and they didn't come back and ask for them, but have talked to us about keep us in mind when times get good, that somehow they would I don't know.
I think I understood your question, because when I have sat where you sat, I've been aware that there have been many raises given to troopers and GBI agents and correction agents over the years where the raises were given but never funded.
Has your office had an occasion? Have you had I know you may have had to do some furloughs. You've had to do that, but have you been forced to do any more than the district attorney's office?
Okay. Mr. Chairman, what we did.
Well, you don't have to get in. I'm just trying we're trying to fund your agency in these tough times with the same level of sincerity that we are the other state agencies that we hear in this committee. And I just think in the quick read of the letter and some of the information, I just don't think that some of those on your council feel like that's the case, and I just.
Mr. Chairman, I'll let you draw your own conclusion there. What we've done on our furloughs is we've let each one of the 43 different circuit public defenders' offices figure out how to take their reduction. Some have taken furloughs, some had vacancies and froze vacancies instead of furloughs. So we've tried to tailor it to what worked better in each judicial circuit. But yes, we've had furloughs.
Do we have any case? I noticed one of the pages in the audit talked about. I'll find it back here. But one of the conclusions or one of the findings were in some of the audits that not all the state positions were filled, but all
Yes.
and more of the state money on salary was spent. Do we have some offices that are paying outside the salary scale?
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't aware of that till I saw this, but you are correct. If you notice that audits gave the agency a response
Sure. Yes,
provision, and that finding will be very easy to correct because of the smaller number of employees and whatnot. We will get that one corrected fairly easy.
And that's not a major.
No, I don't think that's.
Do you have? Let me ask you this, and you may not be at liberty to say, and if this is something that's a council needs to be a council initiative, I guess that's one thing. But if we could build a better battleship, or if you have any thoughts on how we might do that, I would be. I would ask you to bring those before the subcommittee. The same reason we had asked the GBI previously, and we've asked the DAs. And would it make sense? We asked the GBI, would it make sense in some areas for you to house in with local law enforcement, still keep your agency and identity, and not intermingle with the workload, but just be in the same building. So I would ask you the same thing. If there's a better way to organize the ship, we would certainly like it. I for one, am very, very concerned. And I'm just going to say this, and I guess we're on the web, and it can be there for posterity. I am very concerned that there are some members of the Public Defender Standards Council that are attempting to change the state's policy on prosecution of some crimes, particularly capital crimes, by running up big expenses. I have that concern, and that concerns me on two levels. First, the taxpayers' money, and more importantly, and we've had this conversation, it concerns me that breaking the system keeps those that do deserve and we are required to deliver an adequate defense. It keeps them from getting it. So I'm real concerned that we're trying to make policy, not all of the members, maybe just a few, but clearly, at least in my opinion, it's clear to me that some are not concerned about the amount of money we spend in certain areas in an attempt to short the system, and I think that may be a detriment to all Georgians, especially those that need your services. So if you have any thoughts at how we could make that better, faster, stronger, tighter, so that you can continue to deliver a level of service for the most of the Georgians that need it in the most effective manner, I would be interested in hearing that.
I appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, the employees of this agency have heard me say this so much they're probably tired of hearing it. The legislature and Governor birthed this agency 5 years ago, and it's like a child trying to raise it. It does take some tweaking and some discipline and other matters, and I think as this agency progresses in its infancy, I think there's going to have to be some corrections, and as we get through it, if there's anything that I'm aware of, I'll try to make, as you know, we've had some private discussions, I'll try to make you aware of whatever those might be, and any other member that needs it, we'll make ourselves available.
Yes, sir. Last question from me. Are you in a position, given the most famous case has come to at least its first round of conclusion, are we in any position, any better position than we were previously to look into the details of the expenditures surrounding the Nichols case?
Chairman.
Are we still limited?
Mr. Chairman, we're still under a court order.
Okay.
And if that is ever lifted, or whenever that's ever lifted, I'll certainly make you aware of it.
What are the constraints around? I mean, again, anything I'm asking you that would put you in violation of that court order goes without saying. You just tell me you can't answer that. But what has to happen for that court order to be lifted? I mean, does the appeals process have to go away?
The courts would have to lift it. I mean, it's up to the courts, and I think there's still some issues that possibly could be raised that the court is concerned about, and that is why that hasn't been done. I think it will. I think eventually it will be done, but I think out of protection, I think the court is trying to be very cautious about that.
Okay.
And I haven't had any direct conversation with the court, but that is my assumption that the court's just trying to be cautious about it.
Fair enough. I mean, at this point, are there more expenses to be incurred?
To my knowledge, there are no more expenses to be incurred. No, sir. Now,
that could change depending on.
That could change, but to my knowledge, all expenses have been incurred.
And so those have been dealt.
Yes.
And I said last question, but this is more of going back to the document that you had given us. This is 3309. That is the outstanding amounts.
These are non-capital now.
I understand. These are to the best of your knowledge what you have dating back to FY05 obligations. I mean, you have bills and supporting documentation for these monies.
No, sir. What we have is, if you go to the bottom of the second page with me, it says the summary total of all fiscal years. What we have done is, if you go to the right column that says average cost per case.
Right.
I believe you were out, Mr. Chairman, when we went over this, and I don't mind doing it for you. What this is the amount that was billed from July 1 of 08 through December 31st of 08. What we did, when we started tracking those costs exactly, what we have done is averaged into the 11 categories how much we were billed during that 6-month period. We're trying to use historical data. The only way I know to do it is take those averages for the 6 months and then apply them back in their perspective or respective areas to get your perspective of what your liability is.
Okay, so the number of open cases from FY05, for instance, in the appeal is 4, and then you're extrapolating the approximate monies that we may owe based on your. Okay, fair enough.
Right.
But these are the.
And we feel very comfortable, Mr. Chairman, without interrupting you, that these numbers are in. They may not be exactly to the penny,
Sure.
but they are in an acceptable plus or minus range.
So just the last question, so I'll try to get my hands around this. So in this, fiscal year, or in fiscal year 08, for one of the categories, you have 26 cases. Just pulling that, the top one there.
Right.
You extrapolated an approximate liability.
Yes, sir.
Of those 26 cases, you know who the attorneys are.
Yes, sir.
And they have not sent you a bill.
That's right. These are not billed cases.
But they're still open. I mean, are they still open and they're still being adjudicated? Are they still open in that we haven't gotten a bill from them?
No, they are still open as active adjudicated cases in the court system somewhere. And, Mr. Chairman, what happens is the court culture of each circuit is so much different, and it's only because of the court culture. I mean, it's no one person's fault that you may take, and an Alapaha circuit doesn't operate the same way Fulton County does, so it may take much longer for a case to get through the system.
I understand. And what I'm trying to get, I'm just thinking in my mind here, and knock on wood, I haven't had a need for a criminal attorney to represent me. But I can't imagine if I had one, and I had a case that started in FY05, which would have ended in, had to be prior to June 30th, 2005, or that's when the case, I guess, started. It's still open. I can't imagine a case where that attorney would represent me in a criminal matter and not get some money from me and still be representing me. But that's the case here?
Yes, sir. because the number of hours are still open out there.
I understand, but
And this agency,
I can't imagine that they would let me personally run up that kind of a bill, not knowing whether I could pay it or not. So I guess these folks are getting a more constitutionally adequate defense than I could afford, because they appear to have an open cash register as to. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out how those various lawyers might keep their doors open if they're not getting paid. I guess it's not their whole. I won't belabor the point. It just seems strange to me that they would go that long without getting, a progress billing, for lack of a better term. For that. Chairman Chambers, and we'll move on.
Can't we require them to bill at least annually?
I'm sorry.
Can't you require these lawyers to bill at least annually, so that way you have an idea of or quarterly or something?
Quarterly or something.
Would that be a rule and reg by the council itself, or do we need to?
I proposed back in August of last year a voucher system that would require that within 45 days, South Carolina, we've looked at what other states are doing. South Carolina has created a program since Georgia created one. Alabama is debating now in their legislature creating an indigent defense program. And what South Carolina does is you basically up front are appropriated a number of hours. And you will see when we get you this, we give you this report, that we have a corrective action plan that is proposed now. The council's not voted on this. This is my the staff's corrective action plan, a suggestion of how to not cap fees. But if we were representing Chuck Martin in Fulton County and you were doing it, Representative Chambers, you would call us, or you would be given, we would take these categories, and what we would do is say, you have up to 20 hours, say, or 10 hours. And if you need more hours, and we would capitalize it as far as an encumbrance based on, say, 20 hours, let's say $1,200, just picking a number. And if you needed to exceed that, you would need to call and get permission to exceed that, so it's not a flat fee, it's not a cap, but we would recapitalize it. If you could justify needing 5 more hours, we would just deduct it or recapitalize it with an additional encumbrance. And we've laid it out here as a plan of correction, but I don't know if it'll get implemented. I don't know.
That makes a lot of sense, Director Crawford. That's what one does when one has a limited amount of resources to operate on. I think the disconnect that we seem to have is there again. I'm going to go back to some on the council appear to think that there's unlimited resources.
We have limited resources to try to work with him.
And we do, and we all do. Each of us individually that would pay for our own defense and those. I mean, I don't think it's much like education. I don't think that you can spend an unlimited amount of money on education and therefore test scores go up. I think there's certainly more that you can spend to increase test scores to some level. Same thing here. I think no defense is no defense, but I mean, just because there are some cases one can spend an infinite amount of money on, and the outcome is going to be the same.
We can have you a hard copy of it to each one of you in the morning of this, if you wish for it. I'll have it. We'll get it delivered to you.
As you all know, we'll be meeting as a subcommittee at 8 o'clock. We will recess at 9 o'clock to go to Chairman Harmon's full committee meeting and come back at 10. So I think any time along in the morning, that'd be.
I will not be here in the morning. I've got to be in court in the morning, but I'll have someone that will get those delivered to you.
Thank you. There are no further questions. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
I suggest that invite you sometime next week for Chairman Hardman and I to sit down with you and perhaps our counterparts in the Senate as well to talk about if you will, the back liabilities and the audit report and how we can get out of that predicament that was not of your making.
Thank you.
Thank you,
very
Mr.
much.
Director. Next, folks, we have up here is the Judicial Council. They have been patiently waiting
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. We have several. You had indicated to me yesterday, Mr. Chairman, to have some of the sub-program representatives here today to talk about their budget. So I have several people here. Would you mind if we went out of order, because some of them are from out of town?
I do not.
And let them come up and talk about their...
It's your
Okay.
show.
Well, first, Vanetta gave you a handout, and we'll kind of go in order at the top. And then we have some of the sub-programs under Judicial Council that are here. Tom Dunn from the Appellate Resource Center is here, and he can come up and answer any questions that you have and talk about how he's going to reduce his budget and what the impact would be.
Sure.
I'm assuming under the governor's recommendation that additional percentage is going across the board under the Judicial Council program.
We have we actually have the list. We can talk with you about the reductions, but
we got the numbers.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good afternoon. I think this committee knows that from the year 2002 to 2008, our budget, our grant was frozen at $800,000. From 2008 to 2009, with the latest budget reduction, we lost 37.5% of our budget, higher than any other agency in the state. I don't have to tell you what the impact of that is on a budget as small as mine. We work under incredibly stressful conditions, doing thankless work, quite frankly. And any further cuts, I think, will be the end of our program. I just don't know how we can continue to do what we do with that kind of money. The salaries that my staff is paid do not even compare to what they would make in a comparable job in a state position. They are underpaid, overworked. Essentially, my staff has furloughs every year. That's just the reality of it. We also know the reality is that the funding is tough, but we really cannot take any more cuts and keep the program going. I think it's important for this committee to know, and for the larger group in the legislature to know what's going to happen if this agency can't keep going. And that is that the state courts will no longer decide whether death sentences handed out in Georgia are fair. The federal courts will. It's as simple as that. The current law is set up so that the main arbiters of death penalties ought to be the state courts. And I agree with that philosophy. Georgia has the death penalty, and it ought to be Georgia judges and Georgia courts deciding if they are administered fairly in accordance with the Constitution. The federal law today recognizes that. All deference is given to state court determinations. If death sentence inmates are not given lawyers in state habeas, that deference goes away. There'll be no deference. In 1995, when my office was defunded and we essentially shut down, one case went through without a lawyer, Xavier Gibson. Xavier Gibson was 17 years old when he was convicted and sentenced to death. He was forced to litigate his state habeas hearing without a lawyer. Without a lawyer. If you read the transcript, it's appalling. That case was affirmed by our Supreme Court by a 4-3 decision. Although the majority, even the 4 who said it was okay, said Georgia really ought to fund lawyers in state habeas. I have never asked the legislature to do that because I know it's an untenable position. For 20 years, my office, a not-for-profit office, has tried to do that. The Xavier Gibson case, though, I think shows what the problem is. When that case got to federal court in front of then the Chief Judge, the Honorable Dudley Bowen, a very law and order judge, he was not happy. and essentially said, on the record, I could get you the transcript, no one who's ever been in this courtroom believes that what happened at Mr. Gibson's state habeas hearing was fair. And he essentially said to the Attorney General in court, I'm sending this case back to state court so it can get fixed. If we don't have the funds to do our job, that's what's going to happen to all these cases. And it's important to know that these cases are moving through the post-conviction system faster than they have ever moved in Georgia. If you go to Attorney General Baker's website today, you will see him quote as one of his major accomplishments that death penalty cases in post-conviction are moving quicker through the state and federal courts than ever before. And I think he should deserve a little credit for that. The majority of credit, though, goes to the young lawyers who work in my office, because those cases are moving through because we're working the cases hard and we're sticking to the schedules that the judges give us. This committee is actually considering a bill that will make the cases go even faster. There is no way, with the amount of cuts that we've taken, we can make these cases go faster. Up to this point, other than the Gibson case, we have stood firm and said we're not going to let someone go unrepresented. I don't know how much longer we can hold out if our funds continue to be depleted.
Question, and I may have to step away again. I'm getting buzzed for another meeting. Can you get for the committee for Ms. Mitchell the breakdown of your operating expenses of basically what you're doing with the 580 that the state does now?
Sure.
Gives you now.
I can do it. I can tell you just.
Well, just in the interest of time,
sure.
And not to put you on the spot of going
I can do it.
But if you could just get that for her, that would be helpful
sure.
for us. What I mentioned to Dale was that we were going to try to, or Deborah, I know Adele Nesbitt, I apologize. I know Adele Nesbitt from Alpharetta, so we may change her name today. But if you could get that with Miss for Miss Mitchell, we'll
sure.
try to work with you on that. Okay, committee has questions. If you would take one from Chairman Day.
We'll do that. A deadline on that. We have an execution next Tuesday, so we are slammed right now. Would Monday be okay? Okay. Yeah. Good. Sure. Yep. I can do that. Great. Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate it.
Next, I'll have Cheryl Custer with the Judicial Qualifications Commission come up. I think you all have met her before.
I know. It just makes it so much easier. I appreciate the committee taking some time to hear from us. I got my extra cut number today, and I'm here to tell you that basically the commission will be able to hopefully keep the lights on, our 2 employees, maybe pay for our copy bill, and that will be all we have money to do next year. That's it. When we were talking about facilities, we don't want to sing our praises, but this is what we do. I vacuum my own office. I clean my own bathroom. We don't have a water fountain. I buy water. So if that's how we rent a nice space. We are outside of Atlanta, so our rent is better. We look to move into Atlanta, but the GBA charged too much, so we didn't come. We also didn't want to have to be commuting. This was when the governor a couple years ago said, those of us who don't have to come into Atlanta and pollute, please don't pollute. So we do not. We, again, we are a 2-person agency with 7 volunteers with jurisdiction over every single judge in Georgia. Right now, I barely have enough money in this year's budget to continue functioning. The next year's budget, I guess we'll do what we can do with what you give us. I don't know what we will do. Our amount is reduced down to approximately, again, enough to keep the 2 people functioning in what we do. If you have any questions, we accept complaints against judges. We investigate them and prosecute them for ethical violations. I will bring to your attention that it has become very nationwide interesting to hold our judges accountable. I talked to a gentleman on the phone yesterday who said it took him 10 phone calls to find out that there actually was a state agency that would accept his complaint that he had against a judge. And that's who we are. We are constitutionally mandated to provide this service to our citizens, and we do a great job with our volunteers and the little bit of money. If you can help us keep our funds so we can do it, we would be most appreciative. And I promise to vacuum my own floor as long as I'm always going to vacuum my own floor. But, I mean, that's what we do. We don't have any outside expenses. Anybody got any questions? I know you probably don't too much.
Chairman Day has a question.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. My mother says I'm not very good at it, but, you know, vacuuming is vacuuming. I'm a good lawyer, though, really. We get requests for approximately, oral requests or written requests for approximately 800 to 900 complaint forms a year people ask us to mail out. Our numbers have been going down a teeny bit over the last 3 or 4 years because we're available on the internet now. I've put a form on the internet that people can actually get, and we tell them, if you need a form right this very second, here's how to get one. Returning back to us for me to review individually, because I am the only person besides my secretary assistant, about 400 of those come back for review every year. Between 75 and 85 of those present issues that we docket. Sir? Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, that's okay. You would need to define punitive actions. Some type of disciplinary action. May I use our words? All right. So let me give you that first number first. Of the 400-ish that come back, we about 75 to 85, sometimes as many as 100 of those actually present issues that we have jurisdiction over. For example, if you're mad because you've been convicted by a judge and sent to jail, we don't have jurisdiction over that. That would need to be an appellate issue to review. If you feel like you should have gotten custody of the baby, we don't review that. An appellate court would. So we have to send them back if we do not have jurisdiction. However, of those 75 to 100 that we docket, I would say half of those result in some type of disciplinary action, from private communications to the judges of private discipline to public removals. All the way. Last year we had 2. We have formal charges pending against 2 judges right now. We have active investigations against judges ranging from magistrate to superior presently. Thank you. Representative Chambers?
Yeah, Chairman Martin's asked if you can get the same kind of like a P&L type statement for your agency. That way he can get it to Kendra, so that way we can just see where all the money is going. I don't know how.
How could you give?
I guess just a breakdown of the the 289,000, how it's expected to be spent.
How would it? Okay, basically.
Yeah,
okay, so basically here, this goes to salaries, this goes to rent, this goes to that. Be
yes,
delighted.
Yeah,
okay?
and nothing fancy, just on a piece of paper would be fine.
And operating expenses, do they need to be broken down?
I think
okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
I'm going to jump down into the Judicial Council budget. I'm sorry to take it out of order, but we've got folks that came. Professor Greg Roseborough is here with the Law School Consortium, and so that's listed under the Judicial Council almost at the end of that column. He's with the Law School Consortium, and he's a professor at the University of Georgia. So I'm going to have him come up and talk a little bit about his program.
Welcome.
First of all, I thank you for that promotion. I'm actually an administrator at the University of Georgia's Law School, but I'll take that. I'll share that with the dean later this evening. Again, to the committee, we thank you for this opportunity to come and talk to you a little bit about the Georgia Law School Consortium Fellowship Program. And first, let me give you This program was actually created in response to some federal cuts. There was a program, and still is a program to some extent, CLEO. The Council on Legal Educational Opportunities had a program, and I think it started somewhere in the late 60s or early 70s, where students who were interested in going to law school, but for some reason or another, something in the record put them at a disadvantage, were able to go to institutes across the country and go to programs, and based upon their successful completion of these programs, law schools across the country would come in and get an assessment of these students, and oftentimes admit these students based upon their performance. Well, due to federal cuts, the program had to almost be gutted. Supreme Court, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in Indiana thought that it would be a good idea that the state of Indiana create its own program. Justice Benham, when he was Chief Justice of the Georgia Supreme Court, heard a presentation by the Chief Justice from Indiana and thought it might be something that Georgia could do. So in the late 90s, the program was created here in the state of Georgia, and as it originally was started, there were 4 ABA-accredited law schools in the state. Now there's 5 with John Marshall. Each school was allowed to send 3 students to the University of Georgia for a 6-week program in the summer, and these were students out of their applicant pool, who they looked at the record, they seemed to be very good students, but there was something in the background that said, you know, we'd really like to see how they're going to perform, get some sort of early assessment as to how successful they might possibly be. So what they would do, they would come to Athens, spend 6 weeks in Athens, take classes from law professors, and do other things, and at the end there would be an assessment. Well, based upon their successful completion of the program, they were admitted to the school that had recommended them. Due to cuts that have come earlier, now we're down to 10 students. There are only 10 students who go through this program, and we've actually added on an additional school. John Marshall is now accredited, so we have 2 students from each school who come to the University of Georgia. In the summertime, they go through a 4-week program. It's no longer 6 weeks, but it's a 4-week program. Now, it's always held at the University of Georgia. When this program was founded, since it was funded, you know, with state funds, it was thought that we'd hold it at the state flagship institution. So it's held at the University of Georgia. The costs associated with it are they have to pay, they don't have to pay, but we have to pay for room and board. We pay for textbooks. We paid for health care in the past. We are prepared to absorb some of the cuts. One of the things, they were also given a stipend. We are now talking about cutting out stipend. It was a small stipend, but we think that the stipend is something that can be put aside. What the private schools were doing, they were actually matching the stipends that the states were given. They were matching the stipends and giving it to the students who were admitted to their schools because the tuitions were higher. One of the things that we might have to do is getting with them and talking to them. If there are no more stipends, then possibly they could help with some of the costs associated with the program that, you know, we've had to deal with as a result of the cuts.
I don't want to interrupt you because I know a lot of people are here.
Okay.
The state is paying $17,000 per student on average for these 10 students, right?
Yes, yes. Well, I don't want to say 17 because there are costs also associated with, we have faculty teaching, so there are costs there as well.
For 10 students, we're going to spend a couple $100,000 every year to see if they're qualified to go to law school. Is that essentially what it is?
Well, I don't want to say to see if they're qualified
to see if they're going to make it through law school.
Let me talk, and they do. When we look at the rate, the success rate is very high, but let me talk about the backside of this. What we have found with these students, and we do, we go all across the state looking for students, and a lot of these students end up going into areas of public service. We found that probably the majority of them end up working with Public Defender's Office, Georgia Legal Aid. They feel a true sense of indebtedness. A lot of them go back to the small towns where they're from, where there's underrepresentation in terms of lawyers, and open up practices there. So we do feel that the state definitely gets a benefit. All throughout the program, we try to reinforce to the students that, you know, that you are here in no large part as a result to the state being committed to you. And we would ask that you be committed to the state. Now, under the other CLEO program, the one that was federal program, the schools, University of Georgia, Mercer, Georgia State, we would go to the institutes, and oftentimes we would bring in students, but they weren't always Georgians. The one great thing about this program is the students have to have strong Georgia ties. These are Georgians that we're talking about. So this is an educational component that is actually benefiting young people in the state.
Your budget comes directly out of the Judicial Council. Is it statutorily required to have this program, or is this just something that AOC decided under the Justice? Or the Supreme Court decided?
Yeah. Now, Indiana's, theirs has been statutorily required.
Okay, but Georgia's is not statutory?
Ours is not, no.
Okay, any questions, Chairman Day? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next, I have Linda Klein. She's here to talk about the Victims of Domestic Violence Legal Services Grants, and that is, again, in the Judicial Council budget.
Thank you for allowing me the privilege to speak. Good to see you again, Chair Day and Chair Chambers. Very quickly, I'm a volunteer, and I don't work for the state. I don't work for the court system, so there may be some questions that somebody else might need to answer that are a little more technical. But I'd like to tell you just very briefly about why we're here today and why we have this program, in fact. The personal story for me is that in 1994, I was privileged to be elected by all the lawyers in Georgia to be the first woman officer statewide representing the whole state bar. I was elected secretary. And not long after that, because we have so many counties in Georgia and there's a newspaper in every single county, the wire services picked up the story that a woman was elected, and all throughout the state this little teeny story ran, and then my phone started to ring. I've never practiced domestic relations law. I really had no idea what the problems were, but indeed women who were the victims of domestic violence from all over the state began calling me, and they told me that they were poor, that they were in very bad shape, that they couldn't leave the home, and that their children were witnessing some very horrible acts of violence. Many of them had gone to legal aid, but because legal aid was so overburdened that they couldn't help them, and they were turning them away. And what we're talking about is people who make no more than $26,000 for a family of 4. These are very, very poor people. So I just run this statewide campaign, and I had lawyer friends all over the state. So I started picking up the phone and asking them if they could help. And they would say, well, we could take 5 pro bono cases as a favor to you, Linda, but one of them cannot be domestic violence. And then they told me stories that really were scary. One said that the last time he took a domestic violence case, the husband came to his office with a gun. One had his children followed home from school. One had his secretary harassed on the phone at her home. These were really scary things, and these lawyers were not equipped to handle them. I went and talked with our legal services providers, Atlanta Legal Aid and Georgia Legal Services, and I found out that these people knew exactly how to handle these cases. They handled them all the time. They just couldn't handle the volume that were coming at them. And I also learned through being involved with talking with other leaders of state bars in other states that many states were starting to use taxpayer dollars to fund legal services, not just legal services for the victims of domestic violence. So we commissioned a political poll, and we've repeated it this past year, and we found that 80% of Georgia thought it was a great use of taxpayer dollars. It didn't matter what the demographic was, rural, urban, old, young, male, female, whatever the demographic, 80% of Georgia thought that it would be a good use of tax dollars to help these poorest of the poor people in the most horrible of circumstances break the cycle of domestic violence. And what really was amazing about this is that when we do this, the taxpayers save money. And just about every dollar that's spent, and probably more, comes back. Because you can just imagine what happens when we get child support paid, when we get medical insurance for these children paid for through their father, and when we keep children out of foster care because that's so expensive. And we know that that of the $2 million, a little more than $2 million was spent last year, more than that came back to Georgia. So this is a program that not only saves lives, that breaks the cycle of violence, that children don't grow up in homes learning these very bad habits of violence, but also more than pays for itself. That's really the very short story. I can also tell you that in difficult times like this, study after study proves that the incidence of domestic violence goes up, that the incidence of domestic violence in rural areas is even goes up even more, and we have 36 counties that have 0 to 5 lawyers, which means that the lawyers for Georgia Legal Services, and most of them do this work in the rural areas, are in cars driving to be able to represent these people in rural areas, and it's a particular need. If there's a way to get state gasoline to help these lawyers get there, that would be even better. Lots of this is in my head, as you can imagine, since when we started this, I guess in 1997. This has definitely been a part of me, and I'm very, very proud that I can be part of the state of Georgia that have such foresight to run this kind of program, and all of the people it helps. Oh, there is one other thing. When we first did this appropriation and we came to the legislature and talked to you about money, we had a coalition of 66 community organizations that helped us. This was not just the court, it was not just the Attorney General, it was not just the legislature, but it was a statewide coalition of 66 community organizations that were part of this. And what we told you was that we thought we could help 4,000 families with this money. We didn't. We helped 6,000. So we're very proud of what we do, and we think we do it very efficiently. And I'd love to answer any questions you have.
Chairman Day has a question.
Oh. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe somebody like Vicki Kimbrell might be here. Do you know the answer? May Vicki Kimbrell speak? She's from Georgia Legal Services, and she would know the answer to that. If I might. This program is designed to take the victims of violence and is not a prevention program. The state, of course, has grown a lot in population in the 12 years that we've been working on this program as well. So that's part of it. I also think that as there are other programs out there that make people more aware of domestic violence, that people are more likely to report it. So while some of the legal service providers, I know that Georgia Legal Services has been able to do some training with police to help them face a situation to prevent a fatality, I do think that this program is different. It's preventing children in the future from becoming, as you understand. But more importantly, what this is doing is keeping children out of foster care, keeping them off of TANF and welfare. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And well, I'll be a nice person. What I tried to do, because I spoke to the Senate about this in the fall, and what I tried to do was to explain that the taxpayers were making a good investment because we were saving money at the other end. We were keeping children out of foster care, which is very, very expensive, and we were keeping children off of TANF and welfare. But I'll approach it in another way if you'd like. But we have right. All of the service providers have a record of the amount of child support that they've been able to collect. So that's one way that we know that the money that has the money from the state appropriation has come back, because we know exactly how much child support has been recovered. Georgia Legal Services alone, just that one provider, recovered over $1 million in child support last year. So that's one way we can prove it. Well, we're ready to prove it to you. What we'll do is we'll go back. We'll get you the documentation that proves it to you, and then we will share it with the committee. It'll be our pleasure. Thank you. Any other questions? That's right, and we appreciate that hint. Thank you.
No further questions. Thank you.
We do have some information on those grants and some of that documentation. We've given it to the budget office previously, but we did not bring it today to give to the whole committee, but we'll get that to you. Some stats on the numbers served and the cost and per client, and they've provided us a lot of information. Okay, next up we've got Rich Reeves with ICJE. I'm trying to get the people furthest away up first.
We're doing our next retreat at your house, Chairman Day.
Madam Chairman, it's a pleasure to be here today. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. I will tell you that in the current fiscal year, in response to the reductions in spending authorization that have already been put in place, we have reduced by one position. We anticipate having to do so again in the new fiscal year, anticipating indeed that there will be additional reductions in the judicial education funding authorization. Also, I would indicate to you that in the current fiscal year, there were several programs that we have had to do away with, and this was in response to the overtures on the part of the legislators that we look not simply at across the board, so to speak, absorption of the reduction, but do an evaluation of particular products and services to ascertain which of those could be eliminated or at least suspended. And there are several programs that have been conducted by the ICJE for a number of years that did not have as an association with the delivery of the program either a statutory or a uniform rule mandate. And our board of trustees took a look at those areas and said, okay, we probably ought to prioritize the way in which the resources are allocated to make sure that the statutory and uniform rule mandates for continuing education of either judges or court clerks or other personnel, and there are 9 such mandates out there, that those be dealt with first, and that any programs that have been conducted for the benefit of court personnel that are not subject to a mandate would be those that would be reduced, and so we did do that. As we move into the new fiscal year, we had requested that there be some funding in the processing of the creation of new judgeships that would take into account that there is generally a mandate for participation in continuing education, either basic orientation and then ongoing. Because over the years, in the creation of new judgeships, those particular costs had never been calculated into the judicial educational funding. So we did request to begin that for the fiscal year 2010, but our board has indicated that that is something that we can withdraw, so to speak, and so that you see, I think, listed in your sheet, we would officially withdraw that request for the 2010 fiscal year. We are in a position to work with this committee and with the classes of court within the state of Georgia that we do serve to continue to provide continuing educational and basic orientation services, but also to reduce those as is directed by the legislature and the governor's office.
While I still have the chairman's mic, would you get us a list of the 9 mandates that you're under, and so that way we can review the statutes?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I would send that to your staff person. Is that
yeah, or to Chairman Martin, either one, or if we can just get the statute numbers, we can pull them up on Lexis.
I've already provided that for the Senate, so it's just a matter of copying the correspondence and changing the person to whom it would be directed.
Do you know if the senators are looking to repeal any of those mandates?
They have, as I understand it, during the current week, adopted a bill that would suspend for 1 year, and it's the year 2010, under the bill, the mandate as it impacts not the basic orientation training of magistrates, but the ongoing continuing education of magistrates, and also the ongoing continuing education for probate judges. That's Senate Bill 199.
Senate Bill 199. Who's carrying that bill? Do you know offhand?
Yes, Senator
Oh,
Wiles.
lovely. Okay, thank you.
Sponsored it.
I'll get with Senator Wiles at some point and see if we can't just eliminate those mandates. Okay. Done.
Any further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I've been jumping around a little bit, but they're keeping up with who I've had come up because I'm trying to have the people. I'll go last since I'm here anyway. Next, I'm gonna have Sinji Morakumba come up from the Office of Dispute Resolution.
Okay. Just can't imagine why judges and lawyers would have disputes.
Good afternoon. Hello again.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for your time. I know you've had a long day, and I'll try to be brief. Essentially, we're about efficiency in the judicial branch. We do not exist by statute, but the reason we exist is in a constitutional mandate for the judicial branch, that the Supreme Court shall provide for the speedy, efficient, and inexpensive resolution of disputes. That's in the constitutional mandate. And that's the reason why we exist. The Supreme Court, in cooperation with the State Bar, and from what I understand, with the at least the tacit approval of the legislature back in the early 90s, 1993, created the Commission on Dispute Resolution, the Office of Dispute Resolution, to try and fulfill that mandate of speedy, efficient, and inexpensive resolution of disputes. Since that time, we estimate that about 137,000 civil cases have been settled through the system as it has grown. This past fiscal year, we're estimating that about 20,000 civil cases were settled through the statewide alternative dispute resolution system, of which we are a part. And again, to put that in concrete terms, I've been listening all afternoon about the pressures that are on the judicial branch, particularly in times when people are desperate. What we are about is trying to unburden the judiciary and save those precious resources for those cases, oftentimes criminal cases, particularly in Superior Court, that really require the court's attention. So those 20,000 cases, I'm told, are the equivalent of about 17 Superior Court judges working full-time only on civil cases. At a cost savings, the investment in our office of about $170,000 a year in state money really leads to the cost savings of $6.5 million a year to the state taxpayer. In new judges, those 17 judges, their law clerk, their secretary, that doesn't include the cost savings for example, judicial training, judicial continuing legal education, other mandates that there may be, the cost of courthouses, courtrooms, deputies, all those costs that accrue with trying to create a new judgeship. We feel that we provide a benefit, and the cuts that we have proposed and the cuts that we're required to make, we will make through the budget that we use to hire private ADR professionals, lawyers and non-lawyers, who help us train and keep the mediators, arbitrators in the state who are working in the court system educated on changes in the law and keep their skills up. It seems like every time the child support law changes, we need to have some sort of seminar, and we have to do this statewide in order to make sure that our ADR professionals truly understand the law and can help people. Oftentimes the people they help are the people who cannot afford to have a lawyer, and so we really want them to be as well trained as possible. We will have to take it out of the training budget. We are not at the point where we're having to furlough staff. We have a staff of 3 full-time employees for the entire state, and if we have to, we will furlough, but I don't think we're at that stage yet. But we will have to cut back on the services that we provide to the local court programs and to our ADR professionals statewide, and we'll try to find as efficiencies where we can, free venues whenever that's possible, trainers who are willing to volunteer in the local community. We also want to continue to unburden ourselves from the state taxpayer. You know that we collect fees. We talked about that for FY09, and I think we talked at that last hearing that we increased the fees significantly for a large portion of the population of people who register with us. The fiscal impact of that, I cannot tell you at this point. We started that in November. Our registration renewal season is still ongoing, and so we can't really tell you the true impact of that increase. But we had a kind of a complicated system, and I apologize. Before, our fees were actually too low. Initially, registration for most people was $25 every 2 years to register, and then for another group of the population it was $125, and it was an income-based distinction. There are a lot of ADR professionals who volunteer their time, particularly in the smaller courts, the juvenile courts and the magistrate courts, and those people who volunteered, there was a decision by our commission to permit them to pay a lower fee. That fee has been increased to $125 for everybody, flat fee, no exceptions. And the impact of that, on the old system, we were collecting approximately $60,000 a year in registration fees. If the number of registrants remains the same and we don't scare people away because of the increase, then we can probably hope for about $125,000, just about a doubling of the fees that we collect. I will be able to tell you the full impact of that perhaps next spring.
Let me, due to the late hour, let me fast forward a little bit. Some of these people that do this service do so, you say, on a volunteer basis and without a fee. Others, I would suspect, make a good living at it.
Yes, that's right.
And yet we pay for training. Here's what I would like to ask you to do is to try to help us, and we can get with you offline, to get some additional information. We got out of the bar business, or we're in the process of getting out of the state, funding the bar exam with the bill that's moving through there.
I see.
We're letting that go on itself. I would like to work with you to try to do that in a timely manner, not to run the train off the tracks. But to get this into a position where I don't think the state taxpayer ought to be funding any training for somebody that's making a living in arbitration. They should, and they may now, which is information I need to get from you. They should, the training that we offer for those folks should be self-sustaining. If it's a transition period, I'll ask the subcommittee to support us in working with you to do that. But I think we want to sort of transition this into a self-sustaining agency over a period of time. Just because, as you said, your council for a number of years had the fee set, quite low because they had another source of income. We had somebody yesterday that offered to take the phones out of the training center to the tune of about, you weren't here, but $25,000. And we're like, gee, why didn't we think of that before? Most people have had cell phones that when they go down for training, they probably don't use those phones in the room for a while. So if you could do that, I don't think anybody questions the amount of money you ultimately save, but we'd like to transition to that as sort of a for-fee basis and do that if we could.
I understand. Just to clarify, the Supreme Court puts in our mandate that we need to be training people. We obviously want mediators and arbitrators to know what they're doing when they serve the courts. But I think there's room certainly for there's a relatively small percentage of the people who work in the court system as ADR professionals who can demand, I don't know what's high for you, but $150, $200 is pretty high for a mediator. In the private sector, as Representative Ralston said he sometimes uses, sometimes they can ask $400 or $500 an hour. Those people don't work for the court system. They don't care about the court system. They work privately. They get their own cases, and they exist in a different solar system from our folks. We're asked to provide training at a reasonable cost to the people who volunteer for the court programs, and those people are sponsored by the local courts. These are true volunteers for our program. They do not make any money. We sponsor them to attend this particular seminar, this training, at relatively low cost. But I think there's room for other folks to pay for the trainings and try to make that kind of cost neutral for everyone. So I'm happy. Thank you for the offer. I'm happy to work with you on it. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Well, I have folks here who are representing the probate judges and the magistrate judges, and they all came here today in case you had any particular questions. You all have heard my spiel on drug courts, and we have provided Kendra all of the grant information and all of that. So is there anything on the remainder of this list that you have a particular interest in or have questions about in the interest of time? Yes, ma'am. That is a committee that's housed within, the staff person is housed within the AOC, and it is a committee that looks at access to courts They maintain a registry of deaf interpreters that the courts can go to find interpreters for the deaf, and so they kind of host that. DHR by statute is supposed to do that, but they no longer do it, and the courts need a referral source. There's one staff person. Having the meetings, oversee how many interpreters. Well, there's only one staff person who provides the staff support for the Committee on Access and Fairness, and then they also maintain this registry of deaf interpreters. I have Chris Patterson here, who's the Associate Director for the division under which that resides. If you have any particular, Chris, you have something to add about what their duties are. It's been a long day, Chairman Burke. I thought you wanted his autograph. He does it finally. Any more? I did have one thing I wanted to mention to you, and I mentioned this to you yesterday, and you were busy, though. There's a proposed, under the County Municipal Probation Advisory Council, right now we register private probation providers and regulate those providers across the state, and there are also governmental entities that provide these probation services, and they also fall under that regulation. There has never been a registration fee required for those companies. And it's my understanding that that bill will be amended in committee to allow for a registration fee. And so I wanted to bring that to your attention because we are trying and seeking out opportunities to do those kinds of things, to increase fees where it's reasonable and to charge fees where it's reasonable to try to offset the state dollars. Right now, there are no fees charged. Pardon? It would be in 622, and it's in Terry Bernard's committee, yes. Clay Cox.
Ms. Nesbitt, could you get us the statute number that mandates the Committee on Access and Fairness through DHR?
There is no statute number that mandates the Committee on Access and Fairness. There is a statute that requires a registry of deaf interpreters, but that statute requires that DHR maintain it, but they don't.
Okay, that's the statute number I need. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Today we've already.
But it was none of us. I know you do. And you know I'm available if you've got questions, but I did want to recognize Judge Jeff Davis, Judge Linwood Jordan, Judge Ron Ginsburg from Savannah was here earlier and had to leave because it's a long way to Savannah, and Judge Kent Lawrence from Athens, Clark County. They were here to answer any questions that you had today. There is nobody here from the Georgia Courts Automation Commission today. understand. We will make sure they know they'll have an opportunity again tomorrow. We will make sure they know they have an invitation. I'll check into that. I'll check into that. Okay. Thank you.
Copy of our work plan. By the way, I am Mike Holloman. I represent Superior Court clerks in the state of Georgia. I need to first remind you about Georgia JDX, and while the budget item for Georgia JDX falls under the Council of Superior Court Clerks budget, that project is a collaborative effort among all of the criminal justice agencies in the state of Georgia. And in fact, we were nominated, or I guess it was all the volunteers stepped forward, and I didn't move. But we've become the lead agency in terms of fiscal responsibility for the Georgia JDX program. We are not the lead agency on the implementation of Georgia JDX. As I've said, that is a collaborative effort. To give you a quick summary of what Georgia JDX does, I have presented on it many times. It is an effort that has successfully been implemented in multiple counties in the state. We are, Chairman Martin, about producing results and producing projects and getting them done. And we've done that, and we continue to try and do it even in these severely restrained financial times. Our plan for 2010 that you've just been given is very focused on some deliverables that we believe have the potential to provide the greatest benefit to the state. One of those is to pursue grants. Part of that money, 200 and something thousand that's in the parentheses, is the subject of a federal burn grant that we've identified that will help Georgia track sexual offenders. The way you do that, in part, is by creating a statewide jail list. A lot of sexual offenders and quite frankly, other individuals for whom a sheriff is seeking to serve a warrant or seeking to identify where they are for purposes of establishing a sexual offenders registry are in fact in jail in another county or in their own county. In some counties, they don't even know who they have in their own jails. We have identified that as a priority to implement that part of our network. What Georgia JDX does on a macro scale is knit together the case management systems in more than 1,100 courts.
Superior Courts are only 159, but as I've mentioned many times, Georgia JDX is about all of the prosecutors in Georgia, all of the sheriffs in Georgia, all of the magistrate judges in Georgia, all of the Superior Court clerks in Georgia, and yes, we would like to eventually move into the municipal state to do things like traffic. We have focused initially on warrants and some core documents around an arrest and the movement of a person through the criminal justice system. We've successfully implemented that program in the Cordell Judicial Circuit and in the Henry County Circuit. Cherokee County, Habersham, some others are in the process. What we can do, because we cannot ask you for enough money to do the project as it really needs to be done, but we have discovered, as maybe, I don't know, unintended benefit, but by having our budget so severely impacted last year, we realized that what we could do is go out and prepare the local courts and the sheriffs and the DAs and help them to identify what they need to do to conform their case management reporting systems to national standards. Those are called JIM, J-I-E-M, Justice Integrated Exchange Model. It's a process for conforming these data elements into a form where they can, and this is oversimplification, but I'm trying to be very quick. In fact, Chairman Martin, I'll take questions. Y'all have heard me talk about this before. It is as important as it ever was. We recognize that the state needs benefit. Another project that we will focus on is transmitting criminal case disposition information to the Department of Corrections through an automated method, thereby hopefully saving them hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I'd like to ask, and I'm sorry to.
That's fine.
It's been. I mean, it's
a long.
It's that time of year, and everything's rushed, and yet you want to give it the time it deserves. I see your requirements, in terms of your funding, and we'll look through the plan, and it may be in here, but if it's not, this is what I'd like to see that goes with this, because this is not it's not a huge amount of money, but in these days everything that has a comma in it's a huge amount of money. Here's what you need to do, and you're going to do things. You're going to carry on the JDX project. If we do this is kind of a cost benefit thing. If we do this, if we spend this money when June 2010 comes rolling around, what do we have? Well, I know there's going to be some latitude, that's out there, but do we expect to have another Superior Court circuit, on it? May there be more? What will this sort of allow us to do? Okay. If you could just take this presentation and get that to us, because this is an ad. I mean, it's not your fault that it wasn't included, and we've talked about that. I understand, what that is. And the last thing I want to say is, don't get, the Superior Court clerks and the Superior Court judges got to work together to make Superior Courts work. So
it takes two to work together.
I understand that, but just we got your proposal. I know it wasn't in there, wasn't in the original submission. It's an ad. But everything that you can have to add to this, and I haven't had a chance to read it, but if it's not in there, that if the state finds the $510 of state dollars and you use the grant, that's about $700,000 next year. What's the Georgia? What's the Georgia? Not more than we're going to be ready to implement. I know we're going to be ready. We may be ready on a wider scale, but we're going to do this, and this. If we get that, that makes it easier for this subcommittee to compete.
I understand exactly what you're asking for, and quite frankly, as we delve into and find out the parameters around the $35 million in justice assistance grants that will be coming to Georgia. Those are old. That particular program on sexual offenders is existing. There are likely to be substantial amounts that could be available for the type of work that we're doing. Thank you all.
All right. If not, I want to thank everyone else. And thank everyone for coming today. I will again apologize on behalf of the committee that we didn't have more members here, and the fact that I had to go back and forth. The way this session has worked out with day 30 crossover day being next week, as most of y'all know that have attended this committee before, I think 9 of our 11 members have responsibilities to chair other committees, and that's Ways and Means. Even our ex officio members that we would normally borrow to come down here, Chairman O'Neill, and was chairing a Ways and Means meeting today. So that's what we're doing. If there's no further business, I'll make this announcement. We will meet in the morning at 8 o'clock. We plan to go from 8 to 3. There'll be a break for lunch. There'll be 2 periods that have been noted in there for public comment on the budget. There's a sign-up list over in the Appropriations Office in 245. So we will meet at 8. We will break at 9. We will recess to sit the full Appropriation Committee for legislation with Chairman Harbin, and then we will reconvene shortly at that as soon as the full appropriation ends. No further business for the committee. Will stand adjourned.